You're not going to believe what just came out of the DOJ. Suppressors, once treated like contraband, are now officially covered under the Second Amendment. Gun sales might not just tick up, they might explode overnight. And from where I stand, I think what's happening right now could change the firearms market for good. What's up, everyone? This is Ted from Line 45, and today we're getting into the wild chain reaction set off by the DOJ's bombshell court filing, why silencers are flying off the shelves, what it means for your rights, and why this moment might be the biggest shift in gun ownership we've seen in years. Before I start, I would really appreciate it if you would push those buttons below. The subscribe button, the notification bell, all of them. This is not necessary, but those little clicks help a brother out. Plus, it pushes me to give you more valuable gun-related content on your screen. Now buckle up, and let's get back to the video. I've watched a lot of legal turns in the gun world, but this one was a gut punch in a good way. In March 2025, buried in the court filings for Vanderstock v. Garland, the Department of Justice came out and did something I never thought I'd see. They flat out acknowledged that suppressors fall under the protection of the Second Amendment. I'm talking about the same DOJ that spent decades defending tax stamps, year-long ATF backlogs, and red tape like it was gospel. This wasn't vague either. Their brief said it in plain terms. A suppressor is an arm within the meaning of the Second Amendment. That changes everything. For years, we've been told suppressors were just accessories, not actual firearms, and definitely not protected tools. But that argument doesn't hold up anymore, not after the feds themselves flipped the script. This wasn't some law passed by Congress or a new ATF rule. It came straight from the courtroom, and it came with weight. Think about what this means. If the government now concedes suppressors are arms, then states banning them outright are now on shaky legal ground. This wasn't an accident. The shift came as the feds faced increasing legal pressure from gun rights lawsuits all over the country. And now, the suppressor market is seeing something we haven't witnessed in decades. Let's get into that next. Look, this reversal from the DOJ didn't just fall out of the sky. It's the product of a legal shift that's been building since the Bruen ruling back in 2022. That case blew the doors open on how courts evaluate gun laws. No more interest balancing, no more public safety loopholes. The Supreme Court made it crystal clear, if a regulation restricts something covered by the Second Amendment, the government has to prove it aligns with historical tradition. And guess what? There's no solid historical precedent for banning suppressors. Suppressors were first regulated under the National Firearms Act in 1934, but that was more about controlling poaching during the Great Depression than any constitutional test. Nobody back in 1791 was arguing that a quieter musket was some threat to public order. And that's exactly what the DOJ had to face when Vanderstock made its way up the courts. Legal teams from the Firearms Policy Coalition and other groups have been hammering away at this point. Suppressors are not accessories, they're protective tools. They reduce hearing damage, make it easier to shoot responsibly, and they've been around longer than most people realize. So the DOJ didn't shift its stance to be nice. They did it because, legally, their old argument wouldn't survive under modern scrutiny. The writing was on the wall, and once they caved, it gave the green light for the market to react hard and fast. And speaking of that reaction, the next part hit like a freight train, when gun counters started lighting up coast to coast. Now, while all eyes were on suppressors, there was another legal storm brewing in the same courtroom, one that's just as important. Vanderstock versus Garland wasn't only about silencers. It also tackled the ATF's controversial rule on what it called frames and receivers, the backbone of their crackdown on so-called ghost guns. This wasn't fringe stuff. The Supreme Court took it up directly in early 2025, and what they ruled had major implications for how the government defines what counts as a firearm. Let me dissect this one for you. The ATF's 2022 rule expanded the Gun Control Act to include unfinished receivers and DIY kits, saying even a polymer 80% lower that hadn't been drilled yet was a firearm. That turned a lot of legal hobbyists into felons overnight. But in Vanderstock, the Fifth Circuit and eventually the Supreme Court held that the ATF overstepped its authority. They ruled the agency can't redefine a non-functional part as a firearm, even if it's readily convertible. Now here's where this ties back into suppressors. Courts are finally treating firearm accessories and components with real constitutional scrutiny. They're no longer giving agencies a blank check to regulate whatever they want. Between this and the DOJ's own admission about suppressors, It's clear we're witnessing a recalibration of how the law treats the gear we use, and not just the guns themselves. And that brings me right to the next turning point, which is the market getting caught fire overnight. I walked into a local shop in Kentucky the morning after the DOJ filing dropped. The guy behind the counter looked like he'd just worked Black Friday. Shelves that were packed with suppressors 2 days prior, wiped clean. Same story all across the country. Silencer Shop, Capitol Armory, even Palmetto State reported their inventory drained faster than anything we've seen since the pistol brace panic. We're talking about a 400% spike in suppressor orders in just 48 hours, and that's not speculation. That number came straight from Silencer Shop's reps during a live-streamed Q&A. Now, this wasn't just about silencers. Everything tied to them started flying. Threaded barrels, subsonic ammo, and integrally suppressed rifles like the BT-APC-9SD, Ruger Silent, SR-ISB, and Maxim 9 saw restock notices vanish within hours. And it wasn't just online. Local FFLs across Florida, Arizona, and Texas saw lines forming for suppressor-ready handguns. Folks who'd been on the fence for years finally pulled the trigger. The ATF's eForms portal even started lagging due to the surge in Form 4 submissions. It's the kind of market rush you only see when people feel like the regulatory cloud has finally lifted. For the first time in years, shooters feel like there's a window of legal clarity, and they're not waiting around for it to close. And the best part? This rush isn't coming from just hardcore collectors. It's broad, and right now it's easy to see who's buying next. This surge in suppressor sales isn't just coming from the usual suspects. Yeah, you've got your collectors, your range regulars, and your NFA guys stacking more cans. But what really surprised dealers, and I've talked to a few across Texas and Georgia, is who else showed up. You've got first-time buyers, families shopping for home defense setups, and a surprising number of hunters and backcountry shooters picking up their first silencer-ready bolt guns. One dealer in Boise told me he sold more threaded barrel Ruger American Ranch rifles in 300 Blackout in a week than he had in the last 6 months combined. Why? Folks are realizing suppressors aren't just some tactical toy. They cut down on recoil, protect hearing, and in a lot of rural areas, they're a courtesy to your neighbors. People are starting to treat suppressors the way they treat seatbelts. Practical, sensible, and something they want on every firearm they own. A lot of parents are also getting into it because they want to teach their kids to shoot without blowing out their ears. And for older shooters like myself, who've spent too many weekends ringing steel without ear pro back in the day, the hearing loss is real. Suppressors help us stay in the game longer. And what makes it even more interesting is how the legal floodgates are opening up at the state level too. Now that the DOJ's gone on record calling suppressors constitutionally protected, states that still ban them outright are starting to sweat. And they should, because that federal acknowledgement is already being used as ammo, legal ammo, in lawsuits across the country. Take New Jersey, for example. Gun rights groups there just filed Padua versus Platkin, citing the DOJ's own words to challenge the state's suppressor ban. That's right. Second Amendment advocates are now using the federal government's admission to knock down state-level restrictions. It's like flipping the chessboard and playing the DOJ against itself. We're already seeing the ripple effects. Attorneys in Massachusetts, Illinois, and New York are drafting parallel challenges. Legal insiders are saying this could force the courts to create a national precedent, especially after Bruin, where the Supreme Court made it clear. If it's not historically grounded, it's probably unconstitutional. Thing is, this isn't just about legal theory anymore. Real people, from hunters and homeowners to competitive shooters, are watching to see if they'll finally get access to the same safety tools folks in Texas or Arizona already use daily. And the pressure's working. Some lawmakers are even backing away from supporting suppressor bans because they see where this is going. The DOJ opened the door. Now the lawsuits are pouring in. And it's setting the stage for what could be the biggest expansion of suppressor rights in U.S. history. And now, we'll talk about what this all means for regular folks like us, and where it's headed next. If you've ever thought about owning a suppressor, this might be the moment you stop thinking and start acting. Because right now, the legal climate, the market, and even public opinion are all pointing in one direction: normalizing suppressed firearms. The DOJ didn't just admit silencers fall under the Second Amendment to be nice. It did so because it knew it couldn't win the legal fight anymore. That opens the door wide for shooters like us. But here's the thing. Legal momentum doesn't mean the battle's over. The NFA tax stamp is still in play. Form 4 still have to be filed. And state laws in places like California, New York, and New Jersey still block law-abiding citizens from accessing basic hearing protection that's legal in 42 other states. That's why now is the time to stay sharp. Keep your paperwork tight, keep tabs on your local legislation, and support the legal teams challenging these bans. This isn't just about one court case. It's about reclaiming ground that's been lost for nearly a century. And if you're already in a free state, you've got options. Integrally suppressed bolt guns for hunting, subsonic-capable home defense builds, pistol cans that don't kill your hearing in tight quarters. Suppressors are no longer niche. They're becoming part of the standard kit. So whether you're a new buyer or an old-school shooter like me, pay attention. This isn't a flash in the pan. It's a shift, and we're just getting started.